Om Om Sahana Bhavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Saha Viryam Karavavahe Tejasvinavaditamastu ma vidvishavahe. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. So we begin today on chapter 8, the yoga of the imperishable Brahman, Akshara Brahman Yoga. So the word Brahman that we use here is the equivalent to God in English. And in all religions, this word, the idea, so it's common to all religions and beyond that. In the Christian faith, we think of the Father in heaven as God. Doesn't have a birthday or a death day. Brahman doesn't have a birthday or a death day. Neither does Allah have a birthday or a death day. So these are the universality, the universal value belongs to everyone. That's the core. So here we're talking about that ultimate truth beyond religion. Religion is like a set of, like a belief system. It's set for a time, a place, and a group of people, set of principles, values that people can help themselves to evolve. Universal values, Sanatana Dharma, is just another, Sanatana Dharma is another name for universal principles. They belong to everybody, don't belong to anybody. So they're not confined to time, place, or situation. But then nevertheless, excuse me, it doesn't matter whether you use a philosophy or religion, your job is to evolve to get to that truth, that Brahman, that self, Allah, Father in heaven, that truth, that unity, your truth, your core. So the bottom line of all religions is to reach that truth. If you just take that word religion in the Latin, it just means to rejoin back. So in every aspect of life, no matter what you're doing, whether it be secular or religious, philosophical, whatever it be, excuse me, every activity that we do is indirectly or directly, consciously or unconsciously, to get back to that truth, whether we know it or not. So here's a chapter that's talking about that imperishable truth, Brahman. We're calling it Brahman from the Sanskrit. That's about all. So as an individual, we're each made up of spirit and matter. And each one of us has the capacity to focus, make a choice in our actions, to focus either on the physical, when you focus on the physical, or the material, or emotional. When you focus on any one of those parts, what happens? Can anybody think? Say I focus on my physical body. What happens? Anyone?
The experience becomes more focused and heightened.
That's begging the question I've asked, what happens if I focus? So hopefully, if I'm focusing on my physical body, I can become fitter, less concerned about ill health, less concerned about some eventuality that's coming. But that's all it does. It doesn't refine my emotional makeup. So subtler than the material. If I focus on material, it may gain me the material things, objects and beings I can purchase. I can gain that way. I can use that. But it doesn't resolve the physical. If I focus on my physical fitness, I may not be concerned with certain ailments or what have you. Or if I have, then I can start to think about how to not be concerned about it. But it doesn't resolve the emotional setup in me. When I focus on my emotions, feelings, and refine those, the physical generally also can fall into place. It's subtler, or you figure out that mental well-being to actually get onto the physical and material, if that's so what you wish. But it's subtler, but it's focused there. When I focus intellectually, when I develop my intellect, which is key in what we're talking about, it's key to help you refine your emotions, your physical and your material well-being. It's there. So unless I'm focusing on something which is not transient, which is not perishable, all of these things have a shelf life. Only the spiritual essence has no shelf life. So it's beyond that body, mind, intellect, that essential self. And here in this chapter, it's trying to get across to us a very difficult value because we're consumed by body, mind, and intellect. Is that you're that essential self, that imperishable Brahman? Whoever sees it, sees it. So it's pushing you to actually perhaps have a vision beyond the world, beyond that pluralistic phenomena, which is a superimposition upon the Brahman. To look beyond the movie and see the movie screen is more simpler to understand, perhaps. But it's trying to get us to look beyond the world and see what's enabling it. So the point is, when we're focused on the world, everything else goes out of focus. So whatever aspect you choose to focus on, that's in focus. Everything surrounding it goes out of focus. You just have to observe what you're doing in your everyday. If you've got lots of worries and then you go out to watch a movie, you forget about the worries. So you're focused on the movie for the moment, or some other transaction in your life. So if you're focused, here is trying to put across, if you focused on the world, you get the world. The first topic is explaining 1 to 7. If you're focused on the Brahman, the universal principle, that core principle within, you get that. This is also trying to imply that the body, mind, and intellect are quite overrated. We focus only on them. So it's to understand that your We are focused on the body, mind, and intellect, but these are just our vehicles. So we have to keep them in good nick. Can't afford to let them deteriorate and just focus on Brahman, because we're not quite there. We've got our vasanas, desires, so we can't get off it so easily. This is why it's giving us the elaboration of all the spiritual paths that we've got to pursue. But with respect to gaining our focus on the self, so we use the body, mind, and intellect to focus as a vehicle to focus on the self, to realize that imperishable Brahman. So it's a state to aspire for. At the moment, is putting forward that we don't know this state. What do we know? We know we can identify with 3 states of consciousness. Right now, we're awake, hopefully. My eyes might be open, mind might be somewhere else, or maybe wanting to sleep. Sometimes I don't know what's going on behind the screens. Bapita and Zoom user could well be asleep or maybe awake. I'll give you the benefit of the doubt. You're all ears hearing. So we're at the moment in the waking state, and we have our senses available to us. We can make a choice of action. We've got some relative feelings and intellect hopefully available to us, if not subtle, gross, to some degree, which we're to evolve. When we go to sleep, we are in that dream state. That's a different state than this waking state, and we know it from this perspective of the waking state. And in the deep sleep state, there's some figment which brings us back to the dream or the waking state, some figment of intellect. But really, we don't know what's going on there. It's like a nothingness state. So great sages are trying to put forward to us, these are all relative states, waking, dream, and deep sleep state of consciousness. And they're trying to get you to think of what you don't know, of something beyond that, which is almost impossible. It's like, from their perspective, that the world is totally intoxicated. If you're drunk, you don't know you are drunk. But everybody else can see that you're drunk. So it's like that lack of awareness. They know. Everybody else can see that you're drunk because everybody else is sober. So to that extent, when one's under the influence of the body, mind, and intellect, perceptions, emotions, and thoughts, it's very difficult to see it any other way out of that waking dream or deep sleep state. It's like we're intoxicated by our world. So it's almost impossible to see beyond that transient world. That's the ceiling. So it's like we're under the influence. So it's very difficult to take this as a waker, as we think we know. It's like it's putting forward as a to the waker that you're not this waker, you're not this dreamer, you're not this deep sleeper, you are this self. But because we have a ego, we're asserted that we've asserted that solidarity, that we belong to this world. But he's trying to say that truth is something beyond this entire world. That's what we're to comprehend. So you might think it's interesting, the class, the chapter, wherever you go and hear this knowledge. But it's like, unless you're really prepared to get out of this, it's like saying we're in a delusion, because we have a constant birth and death. So the moment we get rid of our desires, we pitch up, the delusion starts to disintegrate. And the Brahman appears. So the solid seeming world starts to disintegrate. So in this chapter, it's split into 4 topics. Brahman and the world. You gain what you pursue. So you gain what you pursue. You want Brahman, you get that. You want the world, you get that. And then there's the root. Through ever steadfast yoga and meditation, you reach the Brahman. Brahman beyond the manifest and unmanifest world. See, even if you can't digest these ideas from now or later, maybe it's just too abstract. But it's to reflect upon it. It's just giving you information, and then you can make your own informed choice wherever you want to go with it. But you're all after something which is full, paripurna, makes you complete. So it's kind of worth investigating. We've all got a body, mind, and intellect. So what is the imperishable aspect which lends itself? We can see that our body perishes. We can see our thoughts perish from day to day, and new ones come about. We can see a cycle of birth and death going on. So what is that imperishable factor is what we're after. So here he begins by explaining, in the first 2 verses, he's taking, if we remember from verse 30 and 29-30, he's talking about Adidevam. He's giving all these Adis, supreme. So here he's, in the first 2 verses, he's using a lot of these Adi Atman, Adi Bhutam, Adi Deva. We're going to explain them throughout the chapter, or good part of the chapter. So it's actually, in the first 2 verses, putting forward, what does it mean? Now, how much is Arjuna asking a question? In fact, we should do the verses. Is everybody okay so far? Anybody got any question? Tim?
Prefix adi, meaning above. So you have these various terms, adi. Can you have adi Brahman?
Above Brahman. You could say that, what does it mean? It's just to mean beyond anything perishable. Even in our, like sometimes in the Upanishads, it puts forward it's beyond the knowledge of the self. It's beyond anything relative, finite. So all it's trying to put forward to us, anything that we use to as our vehicle to get to that truth, even the words, it's beyond that. So if you want to say beyond Brahman, Adi Brahman, fair enough. It kind of, the Brahman is beyond, it's like, it doesn't make sense. It's like saying beyond the self. But relatively speaking, in terms of language and what we're doing, it's beyond that. So it's trying to get us to conceive something which is infinite, which we can't conceive. So it's beyond infinite. We don't understand infinite. It doesn't make sense, really. It's beyond any limitation. We're just giving attributes to push the boundaries beyond any opposite. So if you're using it like language, you could use it. But it's trying to get you out of the remits of any limitation. Why not? If it does it. But it doesn't tend to be suggesting any, where it suggests here in the first verse, it goes, what is Brahman? What is Adi Atman? So Atman and Brahman are not different. It's just talking about an individual, the Brahman, the self in the individual. It's just beyond that. It's just always trying to expand your thinking beyond limits. That's all. Going from, it's close to the periphery as it can get to get you out of it. Anybody else? No question. Let's chant. Guru, if you could chant first.
Yeah, Bhagavad. Chapter 8, The Yoga of Imperishable Brahman, Ashtamodhyayah, Akshara Brahma Yoga. Arjuna Uvacha, Kim tad Brahma, Kim Adhyatmam, Kim Karma Purushottama, Adi Bhutam cha Kim Proktam Adithaivam Kimuchyate, Adi Yajnaha Katam Kotra Dehesmin Madhusudana, Prayana Kalecha Katam Jnayosi Niyatatma Bhi.
Thanks. Dharma, if you could read the verse.
Arjuna said, what is that Brahman? What is Adhyatma, inner self, and what is karma, action? O Purushottama, what is called Adi Bhuta, above elements, and what is termed as Adi Deva, above gods? Question 2. Who and how is Adi Yajna, above sacrifice, here in this body, O Madhusudana? And how are you to be known at the time of death by the self-controlled?
So, he's asking many a question. In fact, he's asking many questions. It's almost like he's heard all of these things before, Arjuna. And as he's heard all these things before, it's like almost we're on the 8th chapter. Let me get them all out. Let me ask all these questions now. Get them cleared. And he's kind of perhaps understood that Krishna is not just his friend. is a little bit more than his friend. So there's a lot of love and affection, and it's difficult when it's been a childhood friend to understand that this fellow's got a little bit more than me. In fact, all of you, if you go back to your childhood friends and where you are now, with whatever your achievements are, it'll be very different. There'll be a very different understanding in your mind of in relation to them. They may have achieved more things, less things, but you're different people. But your childhood friends will treat you the same as when you were a child. They think of you with the same traits. They don't think of you have changed. It's difficult for them to comprehend. So in the same manner, Arjuna's and Krishna were friends, and he doesn't quite know what Krishna's got. So now he's kind of recognizing, I might have something after 7 chapters. Let's find out what you can tell me about it. Let's find out what you can offer. So he starts with the different questions of what is above, Adi, beyond, Kim Tat Brahman, Kim Tat Adhyatman, Kim Karma. So he's asking, what is Adhyatman? What is? He's taking it actually, if you go back to chapter 7, as I was mentioning earlier, in the last 2 verses. So there's something more he wants to get out of it. So what is Brahman? What is action? What is called Adibhuta? What is the term Adideva? What is Adiyajna or Madhusudanam? Slayer of demons, Madhusudanam. And how are we to know these? What are we to know at the time of death by self-control? So what he's actually sort of trying to put forward, how will I know through self-control when I reach realization? How will I know it's realization? How am I going to know? I'm not beyond the world. How am I going to know what's beyond the world? Because you can't conceive beyond finite. You can't conceive, you can conceive it in thoughts, but you don't know what infinite is. He's asking, how do I know by all of this that we do? What is Adi Atman? So Adi Atman refers to that self within, that inner self. Adibhutam Prakriti, matter. The world's made up of matter. Adi Devam, the indweller, that nature. So in the whole of the chapter, he's going to explain these words. So it's going to, you're going to have to be patient. Let's read the commentary. So
Topic 1. Oh.
Sorry. At the time of death, it generally means at the time of death of the ego. So sometimes people might mistake it as at the end of your death, you get to that self. There's nothing as such in any of the scriptures. At the death of your ego, you get to it. But often people misconstrued it. When I die, I've got that moksha. There's only death of the physical body. It's not death of your vasanas. So if you've still got vasanas at the time of death, you just carries on. So the best bet is in this lifetime, refine your thoughts, your emotions, your perceptions as much as possible. Otherwise, you've got to carry it forward and do it later. So you can't neglect anything in this lifetime, if you understand it that way. You've got to put in your 100% because you're refining your perceptions, emotions, and thoughts till you just clean drop thinking about yourself, that ego. So you don't get there until you drop the ego. So let's read it. Sorry, go ahead.
Topic 1 covers 7 verses explaining how one gains the object of pursuit, be it the terrestrial world or the transcendental reality. The chapter begins with Arjuna's several questions. He addresses Krishna as Purushottama and Madhusudana. The Purushottama literally means the best among men. Madhusudana means the killer of Madhu. Krishna acquired that name for having killed the demon Madhu. Haruji, should I continue? I think it's froze.
I think Haroji is frozen. Let's just wait a moment, Dharma. See if she comes back.
Arjuna asks Krishna to explain Brahman, the ultimate reality, the supreme God. What is Adhyatma, Atman, self, and Karma, action? Adi Buddha, Prakriti, perishable matter, the elements. Adi Deva, Jiva, the indweller, the experiencer. Adi Ajna, presiding deity, the pure consciousness in beings.
So those are all his questions. We've heard of these words. So Atma, Adhyatma, beyond Atman. Karma, beyond action. Adibhuta, Prakriti, beyond perishable matter. Adideva, Jiva, the indweller. So we've heard of all of these words in the last chapter. Some of the words I'm getting confused in chapter 18. They've come up. But in the last 2 verses of the chapters mentioned some of these words. So it's like, what are they actually? Even, can you explain? Continue.
Arjuna concludes with a doubt as to who will actually experience the Supreme Self, Adi Atma. The pure consciousness illumines and makes known all objects and beings in this world, but it does not need any other illuminator to know itself. The consciousness illumines itself. It knows itself by itself. When the causal and subtle bodies consisting of vasanas and desires become extinct. The time of death referred to in the second verse is the death of the ego, the death of the causal and subtle bodies. The time of self-realization, when the self reveals and recognizes itself.
So I don't know if anybody caught it. Who will actually experience realization? Because if it's not the body, if it's not the mind, if it's not the intellect, who's this self? Is it to do with the me I know right now, this waker? This dreamer, this deep sleeper, who is it? Is a question. What is this consciousness? So we have our vasanas between birth and then enlightenment. We have a set of existing vasanas in life which we've got to go through and exhaust to achieve that self. So while we're doing that, who is this consciousness? Something I don't know. So if I don't know it, how do I know who's going to, do I become the self? Or is this self something else? Which it says the self, Buddhere Atmana Atmanam, the self, you raise yourself by yourself, the self. So that focus on the self, something is still in the limited, is catapulting you out of that limited realm. So it's essentially like the sun is enabling everything to be illumined on this planet Earth. But we don't really, we sometimes acknowledge it when we think it's there. And when it's not there, we don't have any regard for it, so it's not there. But without it, we can't do anything. But this, nothing in the sun, the world is not the sun. Yet everything functions and is created and is part of. The world is flourishing because of it. So it enables it, the world. But the world and the sun are not the same entities. They're different. We might feel warmth from the sun. So where there's something reflecting for us to feel it, we feel that warmth from the sun. When there's a cloud covering it, vastness, we don't feel it at all. We don't recognize it at all. The thicker our involvement in the world, less recognition of the sun. Even relatively speaking, we're quite prepared to destroy our planet because we don't acknowledge there's anything beyond it. We think we're the doers of it. But there's something enabling it, which is beyond our limitation. That's relative. Akshara, Brahman is beyond sun when we come to it. So what is it? What is this self, this Brahman? And realization, how am I supposed to know what it is? Whether I've got there or not? Because all I can know right now is limited perception, emotions, and thoughts. It's limited. So these are the questions that Arjuna is asking, which perhaps we all ought to be asking. So, Tim.
Is this a celebrated verse in the Gita? Because Arjuna is asking questions, but they're the basis of most of philosophy. They're sort of synopsis of the questions that are asked in philosophy.
Yeah, it's a known verse. And there's so are many others. But yes, it does have that element of it sticks in your mind. Because all of it's talking about, you see, all of it's talking about the same stuff, packaged slightly differently. No. It's all trying to push you beyond the limits, the boundaries of one's perceptions, emotions, and thoughts. Anything that is, the very title infers that imperishable is beyond anything that you know. Everything in the world perishes. It's got a lifespan, birth and a death. So it's trying to put it forward that is beyond that, birth and death, which we can't conceive. Which is trying to get us to project with our subtle intellect something out of the remit of our worldly existence. Yeah, it's could be taken as thing those to be thought on, famous verses as such. Many people will know it, but others too. The whole scriptures like that. So it's also indirectly asking, can you be realized when you're in this existence? Or do you have to die physically, which scares people? Because you think, I don't want to die, everything I want to live. So it's giving a little edge to the limitations of our existence, physically, emotionally, all the perishable aspects. So, enlightenment, when all the desires are gone, cut off, finished, completed, fulfilled. There's no further propulsion for any desires as such. So he's asking, how will I know that? And so he's going to explain it. What happens at enlightenment is this question. At the time of death, which, as we were saying, just mentioned it, it says at the time of death, when you're self-controlled. We're not talking about any old person. He's talking about one who's with self-control, which means with no ego. Self-control is not, as we've learned in previous chapters, not a deprivation of contacting the world, or it's not a suppression, or it's not an indulgence. It's somewhere moving through it in the middle path. You have vasanas, and when you don't have, you have that perfect control. But you're still physical body, mind, intellect still engaging, but your focus is self only. There's nothing else. So he puts at the time of death, because we associate enlightenment with death. Very few with death of the ego. Let's go. 3.
भगवान् उवाच अक्षरं ब्रह्म परमं स्वभावो अध्यात्ममुच्यते भूतभावोद्भवकरो विसर्गः कर्म संजितः.
Sam, if you'd like to read the verse.
Verse 3. The Blessed Lord said, Brahman is the imperishable, the supreme. His own being is called Adya Atma, inner self. The creative force that causes the birth of beings is called karma, action.
So Krishna comes to Sri Bhagavan Uvacha. Krishna's beginning to answer Arjuna's question. So Akshara Brahma Paramam. Brahman is the perishable, imperishable, supreme. Brahman is the imperishable supreme. And his own being, Swabhava, is called Adi Atman. The inner self in you is that Atman. The Swabhava of Brahman is the nature of Brahman. Just like the Swabhava, Swabhava means nature. The Swabhava as the sun is its rays, gives out the warmth. So wherever there is a reflecting medium, you feel those sun rays. So wherever there are things which are conducive, there are beings there. So that creative, Brahman has a creative urge by nature. It's like a story to explain how we're here in some sense. So a creative, because we exist as far as we're concerned in this perishable world. So this visaga, this creative urge, is called karma, action. That creates so wherever there's a reflective medium, you see a reflective sun. Wherever there's a Brahman, which has a Swabhava, creates a world. It's just a reflection. But the Brahman has nothing to do with it in a sense. It's a bit contradictory sounding. So the sun has a Swabhava which creates many. The rays create many suns in a sense. You may feel it's sunny one place, and it creates an atmosphere of a reflection of the sun. The ocean, on the surface, the ocean is a vast sheet which creates waves, but the waves are nothing but the ocean. So it's like saying the Brahman has created this world. You might think, why has the Brahman created this world? It's a tricky question, as we will come to that explanation. In fact, we've had that explanation because we misapprehend the self. We don't see that, we see something else. So within us, there's that nature, that Swabhava to create. So you've got an option to go into the world or get back to the self. So that Supreme Brahman has a Swabhava to produce, just as the ocean has a nature to produce waves, the sun to produce many suns of heat. All the disturbances on the ocean, in the ocean, are on the surface. There's no disturbances deep within. All the disturbances you have of the world of the Brahman are of the world. There's no disturbance of the Brahman. It's just the world has a disturbance, that superimposition on the Brahman. There's a disturbance. All the commotion is just a little disturbance on the face of the Brahman. So what he's trying to put forward is the Brahman is the supreme, imperishable. But the Brahman has a nature, a creative being. And wherever there's an opportunity, there's a creative urge, which causes birth and death of beings. So what we're seeing, the world is just a cause and effect of birth and death, a superimposition on the Brahman. It's just like the wave. So he's trying to give you an idea of what this Brahman is about. That it's a substratum of everything. He's talking about the grandeur of the Brahman. So nothing exists forever in this world. But the Brahman backing it is beyond, it's imperishable, beyond imperishable. Right now we're caught up in the waves, so we don't see the ocean. Let's read it.
Krishna answers Arjuna's questions raised in the first two verses. He covers Brahman, Adi, Atma, and Karma. Brahman remains ever the same, imperishable, changeless, the supreme God. His own being, his basic nature, is known as Adi Atma, Atman, the self in all beings. Atman emanates as individual beings. The emanation that causes the birth of beings is referred to as karma, action. This emanation compares to the creative urge in any creator, like a painting urge in a painter, poetic urge in a poet, musical urge in a musician. When a painter identifies with his painting urge, he paints. Similarly, when Brahman identifies with its creative urge, there arises living beings. Brahman resembles the sun shining above. The sun's being, its basic nature, spreads as sun rays. These rays emanate as reflected suns through reflecting media. Rays falling on reflective surfaces create reflected suns. Sun rays resemble Atman in beings. Atman functioning through the material equipments produces the world of beings. Karma mentioned herein refers to this creation.
Okay, so we'll explore this verse a little bit more next week. I know it's a little bit, maybe there might be a few questions which come up. Remember, the class, you can ask questions because we're all not Lord Buddhas just quite yet. We should ask questions. So it's a little bit tricky, but it's what we need to know. Okay. Hari Om. If you have any questions, note them down for next week. I would have questions at this stage. I was listening for the first time. Okay. Hari Om.